Hi, my name is David Schultz, and I'm the founder and CEO of MediaLogic, an agency that specializes in the marketing of Medicare Advantage plans. We've been doing this for more than 20 years and currently work with 10 different insurance companies across the country. We've always pushed our clients to think about return on marketing investment for these reasons. Number one, it flips the perspective on what you spend from being an expense to being an investment with an expected return, and that in turn elevates the role of marketing in the C-suite. We also think it holds everyone accountable and gets everybody focused on achieving the maximum return. So we think ROMI matters more now than ever. Why? Well, inflation is weighing heavily on consumers and businesses. The talk of recession adds fuel to the fire. And health insurance marketers are being asked to do more with less. Now more than ever, ROMI matters, and success will definitely go to those who own it. Before we get into ROMI, let's talk about some of the other performance metrics that are out there. These are all very, very important. Responses, response rates, leads, lead rate, cost per lead, cost per sales, and so on. These are critical to making good decisions, but ROMI is really going to help you make the critical decision, starting with establishing of budgets, understanding really what it's going to take to actually reach the goals that the organization may have for you, rather than just picking numbers out of the air, which frankly often happens. The other area this helps you in is defending your budget, being able to justify the investment you have made and defending it, especially at a time like now where people might be looking for cuts. And instead of, again, being viewed as an expense, being viewed as an investment, and in fact, the last place maybe a cut should be made, maybe even more money should be invested. This also helps with the allocation of budgets, perhaps by line of business, depending on the relative expectations for the line of business as well as the performance. This can help you set membership goals. This kind of goes back to the establishing of budget, making sure that you're being realistic about where you're going to get to based on what you're able to invest. Of course, you can use ROMI to evaluate how you did in a campaign, which ultimately helps you to define success. So what is ROMI? Very simply, it's the total lifetime value of a member divided by the total marketing investment. The lifetime word is really critical because it's important for you to get credit for the entire lifetime of a customer. You won't have recurring marketing costs past year one, but you will have recurring revenue. So it's really the appropriate way to look at it. Now, defining value is a little less easy because, especially for nonprofit regional payers, net margin isn't even always something that's talked about or computed because sometimes it can be very close to zero. So with that, there's a tendency to look at the gross margin. So what is gross margin? Gross margin is the revenue that you earn on a member minus the medical expenses. So according to Mark Farrar, the prevailing average gross margin in the Medicare space is 17.2%. Now, going back to net margin, if you want to really raise the bar, in terms of what you have to achieve, you take the gross margin dollars and you subtract from that your operating expenses, and then you're left with what you have now as net profit or net margin, which for sake of argument, we're going to say hovers around 2% for the regional not-for-profit health insurance company. Here are some of the key data points you're going to need if you really want to be able to compute your ROMI and really use it the way that I'm going to show you in a minute here. So the first thing you need, obviously, to know is your total marketing investment. That's an easy one, usually one that you have control over. The second one is the average annual revenue per member. And this is something that I'm often surprised is not common information within the organization. It seems to be something that finance tends to hold on to. Now, in the Medicare space, it's true that the revenue per member obviously varies dramatically based on the individual's risk score, But on average, there is a number, and I'm going to share that with you in terms of a national number, but your organization, I'm sure, has this number, and you should know it. The other thing you should know is the average tenure per member. We find that this is sometimes a difficult number to get after because some of the payers we've dealt with, for example, have changed their CRMs over a period of time, and somehow during those transitions, they lost the original sort of member start date, which means that they don't really know when some of their members originally started. That's a problem because really to understand and certainly to compute ROMI, you really do need to know what the average tenure is. But we have worked with those clients and others to really try to use some other data points to try to understand what that number is. The next number is the medical loss ratio, and that simply put is what are the medical expenses that on average are being spent against the revenue, and it's referred to often as MLR, and that is used then to compute the gross margin. So you basically take your revenue minus your MLR, and then you know what your gross margin is. And then finally you have the net margin, which, as I said earlier, is the highest bar to get over, but probably the most appropriate number to look at if you're a finance person. And I think it's always good for marketing people to present themselves not just as marketing people, but also as business people. So let's look at the estimated lifetime value of a Medicare member. We're going to look at it first through the lens of gross margin, and then we're going to look at it through the lens of net margin. So we do know from Mark Farah's year-end 2020 report that the average revenue per member for Medicare is $12,720. We know from our experience, this is kind of a data point that we have developed over the years ourselves, that the average tenure per member is around 7 years, okay? We know that that average margin is 17.2% using that same Mark Farah data. And if you do the math on this all computes out to $15,315, which is great. But at the same time, we know that we don't get all these dollars in year one. We get them in year 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. And the dollars that you receive, years down the road don't have exactly the same value in today's dollars as the ones you get now. So we do another computation, which is what is the net present value, for that member over the course of their lifetime. And in this case, the number goes to $14,167. Just so you understand, we use the discount rate based on annual inflation at 2%. We know that inflation of late has been much, much higher, but we're using the 2% because we think this has been a more accurate reflection of what we've seen over the last 2-3 decades. So that's the gross margin view. Let's take a look at the net margin view. Obviously, the revenue per member and the average tenure per member, those remain the same. What's very, very different is the margin at 2%, and you'll see how that has a big impact on the projected lifetime value of the member. So now we're talking about $1,781, which the net present value of that is $1,647, and that's a number you're going to see show up in a number of our examples in a moment. All right, so how do we put ROMI to work? These are 3 different ways to do it. I'm going to walk you through examples of each. The first is to gut check the viability of a potential investment. We find sometimes that clients have budgets to spend, and then somebody else in the organization might come up with a membership goal, and they're not necessarily developed in any type of integrated way. It's kind of 2 different data points from 2 different places, and we find that the ROMI analysis can help to get everybody on the same page and truly gut check the viability of those numbers. The next is taking a look at how to establish campaign benchmarks, getting an understanding around what a cost per lead might look like or what a cost per sale might look like. And you'll use that data then to guide your decision around tactics and channels. And then finally, there's evaluating the campaign results, looking at how you performed on the back end. So let's get into the first example, the gut check. We're going to do this for Medicare agent, a hypothetical where we've got $400,000. We're also going to use net margin. That $400,000 should be all-inclusive, media, production, postage, creative development, fulfillment, call center. Just know that the more inclusive the dollar amount, the more accurate the computation. Next, we have that lifetime value at $1,647. It's a number we've already established, but we're showing you the math again there on the right. And then we're looking at a scenario in which we want to achieve a 20% return on our marketing investment. So what are the number of sales we're going to need? And that's, again, simple math. 291 is the result. And then we're going to look at, what are the number of leads that are needed to help generate that 20% return? And in this scenario, we're saying it's 1,164 because that's assuming we've got a 25% closing rate. So you can imagine now a scenario in which you've got sales and marketing together, and basically, marketing is asked, with $400,000, can you generate 1,164 leads? And you might want to look at your historical data to gut check that. But it gives you a sense of, again, viability. And then likewise, sales is being asked, are you going to close 25% of these leads? Are you on board to do that? They may too look at their historical data. But when you're done, you're going to have made a good decision about where the budget needs to be. Maybe that needs to be modified, or at least all be on the same page about what your relative expectations are for cost per lead and closing rate. Let's talk about how do we use ROMI to establish benchmarks. Again, we're talking about Medicare. We've got that same lifetime value per member, okay, the 1647, and then we're going to compute what's the cost per sale. What can that be if we want to generate a 20% return? That's 1372. And then the question is, what is the cost per lead going to be? And again, we're assuming the 25% closing rate, and that comes out to 343. So two things you do with these benchmarks. One is you might want to look at some historical data and say, how do these numbers compare to what we've done in the past, to make sure that your organization, given its competitive landscape and all other factors, to just see if you feel comfortable being able to deliver these numbers. The second way to use these, again, is something of a measuring stick for the individual tactics and channels you use to evaluate, which ones are performing better than others, which ones maybe you should give more investment, which might you want to reduce the investment, and are there even media channels that you don't want to invest in any longer. It doesn't mean every tactic needs to fall at or below these thresholds. It just means that over the course of the campaign, you're going to look for the total number to be in this range. But if you do have outliers in terms of performance against these benchmarks, you're going to make some decisions possibly about eliminating those media tactics. And then finally, we have the use of ROMI to evaluate results. Again, Medicare AEP, 2 million, hypothetical, same thought process in terms of getting all the expenses together. In this case, we had 3,000 new members, and this was a gross number, which is important to note because that's all marketing can control. The lifetime value is the same, 1647, and then we have just simple math tells us that we generated nearly $5 million in net margin. Again, 3,000 new members generates a lot of money. And if you do the math further, you'll see that the ROMI on that is 147%, which is really great. And if you look at the dollars, it's nearly $3 million. So you spend the $2 million, you not only get your $2 million back, but you get $3 million on top of that. And that's a good story to be able to tell in the C-suite. I'll end by just telling you that we have a tool at MediaLogic called ROMI Check that we developed quite a few years ago to help us with all of this math and all of these computation and analyses. And if anybody's interested in having us help you with understanding your numbers going into a campaign or coming out of a campaign, we'd be happy to spend some time with you. Just drop us a note. So I hope this has been helpful, and I hope to hear from you. Thank you very much.